The talk of the off seasons right now for Carolina has been around conference realignment. They had the Magnificent Seven report. I also saw a report from Noah Monroe from the Daily Tar Heel. Each SEC school is expected to receive about $68 million in their new TV deal, while ESPN will only pay ACC schools 17 million. Big Ten's new deal, schools could see returns north of 70 million after UCLA and USC complete their moves. What do you think North Carolina's future is with conference realignment?
I think North Carolina should remain in the ACC. It's their natural home. By the way, all these schools, clamoring for how are we going to get more money, there always seems to be the assumption that if they could get out of the grant of rights, they would just go to the SEC or the Big Ten. I don't think the SEC or the Big Ten has extended any of those schools an invitation. And I'm pretty sure the SEC has already said they're happy at 16, and they have very little reason to add teams that are in states in which they already have a member. There's no more money. So I don't think there's an obvious place to go. I have a funny thought for you. What I think the ACC should do is go get 8 teams out of the Pac-12 and form the APCC, the Atlantic Pacific College Conference. And that would take their footprint to include all of the West Coast. Those schools would not have to travel that often to play. And because the ACC network would be expanding its footprint, there would be more money available. And I think you could force a renegotiation because the Pac-12 is out of contract or will be. That to me is a route to go. If they don't go there, I'd go get Stanford. I'd go add Stanford, add the state of California. It brings a lot more money in. And use that. I would try to figure out ways to get more money out of the basketball tournament. But I don't know. Taylor, you have Tar Heel loyalties. Do you want to see Carolina playing in Madison and State College and Iowa and Minnesota? I don't. I want to see them playing Duke and State and Wake and Virginia and Georgia Tech and Miami. Those are their natural rivals. And people also forget, you could tell us some of this gets me going. Rutgers is in the Big Ten. Does anybody want to change place with Rutgers and their athletic prowess? So it's not just about money. It's also about coaches, it's about fans, it's about merchandise and ticket sales and sponsors and boosters and now NIL. They have to figure out a way to compete. But I don't think the way to compete is to jump over into the arms of the Big Ten or the SEC. There, as Jim Phillips said at the meeting they just finished, they're third, and they should work hard to be as close a third as they can be, and that's a pretty good place. And by the way, if they're third, that means the Pac-12 is behind them, and they should go get some of those schools and bring them into the ACC. The SEC and the Big Ten have always been aggressive. So is the ACC when they expanded, and they need to. I would like to see them be aggressive again.
You were at ESPN during the ACC negotiations. How strong do you think the grant of rights is, where it seems like they're looking for ways out of it, but we keep hearing about talks about wanting to get out of it, but it seems there's got to be something pretty strong in it where teams just can't pick up and move overnight.
I am pretty sure that we at ESPN asked them to do that in order for us to make the commitment to start the network and to do that. So I'm not a lawyer. I haven't read it. If I did read it, I forgot it. I'm assuming it's very, very strong because it was written to be unable to break.
Yeah, I would have to imagine that is the case. And when you were talking about if I would want to see North Carolina at other places, I love North Carolina in the ACC. The only places I would want a road trip are some schools in the SEC. Like if I could get a home and home with Tennessee, I would love to go to Knoxville for a game. Oxford, Mississippi, I would love to see the Grove for a game. But overall, I do think I like North Carolina in the ACC. But one thing I feel like I've heard too with the ACC is that it has a narrative problem where their schools have a ton of success in the tournament, but for some reason they're getting, 5 teams in the tournament in comparison to the Big Ten who gets 10. And you see what schools like Purdue do when they do get into the tournament. And then here comes North Carolina and Duke and Miami to the Elite Eight and the Final Fours. How much of the ACC's problem do you think is one of a narrative and not having somebody being the one who's kind of propping them up and saying we're just as good as some of these other conferences?
It's a question I'm not sure I have a good answer for, Taylor. I had not thought of it that way before. It sort of blurs my mind every time I listen to them talking about quadrants and who's played and strength of schedule. I mean, there's a lot to be said for just looking at the teams and figuring out who do you want to go and who should be there. And yeah, I'm often surprised when the ACC doesn't get more in to the tournament.
And you've seen behind the scenes negotiating these massive TV deals, how much money goes into college athletics. What have you thought of the introduction of the name, image, and likeness, NIL, to where athletes are now able to see a part of the revenue coming in and able to profit, even though it's not coming from the NCAA's pockets?
Look, I feel that the players have had a legitimate grievance, that they are doing a lot of work, bringing a lot of money into the university. Given everything that's gone down, it is sometimes hard to suggest that I don't want to denigrate the value of a North Carolina or a Clemson or a Florida State education, but it kind of feels like they should get paid something for doing that. I find the NIL thing to be a little clumsy. It's going to be clearly abused, and things are going to come out, and people are going to do ridiculous things. So I don't think it's a perfect instrument, but I do think it's a bit of a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and NIL, the biggest complaint with that is how hard it is to regulate what schools are doing, and the big schools with the big donor bases will dominate the sports landscape. But in a sense, they've already been doing that with teams like Alabama. What do you think college sports will look like in 5 years or even 10 years, and how much will it be unrecognizable from what it was just a couple of years ago?
I think that it will continue. There will continue to be more money poured into it. I think the student athletes in men's and women's basketball and football will continue to look more and more like professional athletes playing for university. We should remember that lots and lots of students play other sports, have a very different experience than those players have. A lot of the same experience, a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of work, but hard to argue that some of the other teams are bringing in the kind of revenues that would justify the schools paying them. But I think it'll look very different. I also think the landscape will continue to change, and you'll continue to have bifurcation between the big, powerful, rich schools and the other schools. One thing that I can foresee happening in the not too distant future is it bifurcating for the NCAA tournament, the men's basketball tournament. By the way, I don't know that it'll be the NCAA tournament for that much longer. If you're looking for ways to get more revenue and you're a big school, somebody is already having some discussions about why are we dividing all that money for the NCAA tournament among 300 schools? Why don't we divide it between 64 schools who play in 4 big power conferences?